This was our first Fred Olsen cruise. We flew to Tenerife, boarded the Braemar, visited the 3 western Canary Islands, then up north to Madeira, back to the 3 eastern Canary Islands, returned to Tenerife, and flew home. Let's take a look at each of the islands in turn, starting with La Gomera. Our ship docked in the southwest of the island, at Val Gran Canaria. We'd arranged a hire car and set off along and up the side of this magnificent valley. The Braemar was moving at lunchtime around to San Sebastian on the east coast of the island, so we weren't returning to Val Gran Canaria. The views from the top of the valley were stunning. These very windy roads were a feature of nearly all the islands, but they were generally in good condition and there was little traffic. As we drove inland, the scenery changed completely. We did a shortish walk to the summit of Garanjay, La Gomera's highest point, at just under 5,000 feet. Mount Tidy, Tenerife's snow-capped mountain, can be seen in the distance. I had planned routes for our tours of the islands using sunflower guidebooks. La Gomera is quite a small island, and we were able to see a lot of it. In this valley on the north coast, there were a lot of banana palms. We were impressed with the Braemar. It had a refit about 6 months before, so was looking fresh. It carries about 900 passengers. We rejoined the Braemar that afternoon in San Sebastian, before travelling the short distance overnight to El Hierro, where we again had a hire car. Climbing steeply out of the port, we passed this strange sculpture before reaching the main, and pretty much only, town, Valverde. Parts of the countryside in the centre of the island could almost have been British, with green fields divided by stone walls. We then reached the west coast and dropped down to sea level again to visit an open-air museum showing how the locals lived in past centuries. As well as building their houses from the volcanic stones, they made use of some of the large lava tunnels. The open-air museum is also a home to a breeding centre for the nearly extinct so-called El Hierro giant lizard. Having seen very much larger lizards elsewhere, I'm afraid these ones didn't impress us. Next, we went for a walk along the coast and through an area of very rough volcanic rocks. We then drove up a very narrow, windy road to a plateau. And this remote sanctuary. We completed our circuit of the island through a large pine forest with some great views, and back to the port for our onward voyage to La Palma. We docked in Santa Cruz, quite an attractive town with an old centre and a small local market. Then picked up our hire car and drove south, stopping briefly in the town of Matzo before reaching the southern tip of the island and the San Antonio volcano, of which this is the crater. Looking across to the coast is the smaller Teneguia volcano, which last erupted in 1971. Right down by the rocky coast are the salt pans of Fuencaliente. There are signs explaining the salt production process, and we found this well worth a visit. We had generally very good weather, but it could vary tremendously within short distances on different sides of mountains. You can just see the bow of our ship here in Santa Cruz, from where we made the 300-mile voyage north to Madeira. It was 11 years since we spent a week on Madeira, and we noticed that Funchal had grown tremendously, spreading all along the coast and up the hillside. The centre, with its lovely gardens and narrow streets, hadn't changed much at all. We took a look around the old fort and the market before taking the cable car, which hadn't existed on our previous visit, up to Monte. The church at Monte and the still very popular basket rides were as we remembered. We spent most of the day taking a walk alongside a lavada from Monte to the Palheiro Gardens, from where we caught a bus back to the centre of Funchal. We then had a day at sea on our way back south to Lanzarote, where we had spent a week in 1987. Arrecife, where we were docked, wasn't a very attractive place. We walked a few miles along the promenade, and then caught a bus to the nearby resort of Costa Teguise, where we had a very nice lunch. We sailed overnight the short distance to Fuerteventura, where we hired a car for the day. This large area of golden sand on the northeast coast of Fuerteventura is a very striking contrast on a volcanic island where most of the rock and sand is black. Fuerteventura is more barren than the other islands. Lots of empty scrubland, occupied only by occasional goats. There were a couple of quite pretty little places, such as this fishing village, and in the middle of nowhere amongst dry hills, this oasis, a lovely little town called Betancuria. Our ship had moved around the island during the day, from Puerto del Rosario to Gran Tarajal, but we managed to find it and be back on board in time for its departure to Gran Canaria. When we got to the Cross of Tenaya in the centre of Gran Canaria, it was cold and wet, and there was no visibility. Fortunately, just a few hundred yards further on the other side of the mountain, we came out of the cloud and had spectacular views and clear blue sky. Gran Canaria is known as the miniature continent because of the incredible variety of landscapes, and during our day driving around parts of it, we could appreciate why. This was the last island on our cruise. Each island was different, and all were worth visiting. We also enjoyed the cruise itself. The food was very good, and the staff friendly and helpful. The whole trip was extremely good value for money. From Gran Canaria, we returned to our starting point, Tenerife. We had a late flight home, so we had a few hours to look around the town, Santa Cruz. Before saying farewell to the Braemar and returning home.